God shows you these signs when you're aligned with His energy. There comes a point in your life when things start to feel different, not just around you, but inside you. You wake up one day and realize that the noise of the world doesn't hold the same power over you. The chaos that once pulled you in now feels distant, like a foreign language you no longer speak. You start to sense a rhythm, a subtle but unmistakable current moving through your life. And it doesn't come from the outside, it comes from deep within. This is not a coincidence. This is alignment. And when you're aligned with God's energy, the universe begins to respond in ways that most people will never understand. You begin to see signs, not just ordinary signs, but sacred confirmations that you are walking in sync with something eternal. I want you to think about this. Have you ever experienced a season where things just seemed to click, where conversations flowed with purpose, where the right people showed up at the right time, where obstacles began to dissolve without force? That's not luck. That's alignment. That's divine energy moving in harmony with your soul. When you're aligned with God's energy, life doesn't become perfect, it becomes purposeful. You stop feeling like you're pushing against the current, and instead, you begin to feel carried by it. That shift is everything.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
But how do you know when it's happening? How can you be sure that you're not just imagining it all? That's where the signs come in. God is not silent. He never has been. But He speaks in a language that only the aligned can truly hear. The first sign is peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from comfort, but the kind that doesn't make sense. A peace that settles into your soul, even when your circumstances are chaotic. When you're aligned, your inner world becomes still, even if the outer world is shaking. You no longer panic when plans fall apart. You no longer chase what doesn't feel right. Because deep down, you know that you're moving with a higher intelligence guiding every step. Another sign is synchronicity. The universe begins to echo your thoughts. You think of someone, and they call. You have a question, and the answer appears in a book, a song, or a stranger's words. You feel drawn to certain places, certain numbers, certain moments, and they all seem to lead you deeper into clarity. These aren't just flukes. These are divine fingerprints scattered along your path, nudging you forward. And the more you trust them, the more they appear. It's like tuning into a frequency that was always there, but you just couldn't hear it until now. But let me be clear, alignment doesn't mean avoidance of pain. In fact, when you align with God's energy, your sensitivity increases. You start to feel everything more deeply. The joy becomes richer, yes, but so does the sorrow. You can no longer tolerate what is not true. You can no longer stay in places that drain your spirit. That's another sign. Detachment begins to happen not because you're cold, but because you're finally awake. You realize that not everything or everyone can go where you're going. You start letting go not out of bitterness, but out of reverence for your soul's evolution. And that letting go, that sacred release, is one of the clearest signs that God is moving you. There's a moment in the lives of those who are aligned when they stop asking for signs and start becoming one. But before that moment, the signs serve as divine mirrors. They reflect back to you who you're becoming. Have you noticed how you've become more aware of your thoughts lately? How your intuition is louder than ever before? How you can walk into a room and feel the energy before anyone speaks? That heightened awareness is not a fluke. It's the result of spiritual alignment. Your senses sharpen because your spirit is no longer dulled by distraction. You begin to see behind the veil of things. What used to confuse you now feels obvious. What once hurt you now teaches you. And here's a question that can shake you to your core. What if the pain you went through was not a punishment, but a preparation? What if the breakdowns were breaking open the space for God's vibration to fill your life? Alignment often starts in the ruins. It begins when everything you thought you were supposed to be starts to fall apart. And in that collapse, something holy emerges. You stop pretending. You start listening. You stop performing. You start becoming. That's when the real signs show up, not on billboards, not in lightning bolts, but in the quiet knowing that you're exactly where you're meant to be, even if you can't explain why. God's energy is not loud. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It hums. And when you're aligned, you begin to vibrate with that same stillness. You begin to make decisions from intuition, not insecurity. You begin to speak from clarity, not control. You begin to walk with a lightness that can't be faked. And people notice. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. You become a mirror for others, a reminder of what it looks like to live in flow, not in force. Oh, if you've been seeing the signs, if peace is finding you in the chaos, if synchronicities are lighting up your path, if your spirit is pulling you towards silence, change, and truth, then trust it. You're not imagining things. You're aligning. You're remembering what it feels like to live in rhythm with the energy that created you. And once that alignment clicks in, there's no going back. You'll never settle for noise again. You'll never crave chaos again. You'll never be satisfied with shallow again. Because you've tasted something real. Something eternal. And once your soul remembers that frequency, it will spend the rest of your life guiding you back to it. When the universe becomes your mirror, the strange clarity of divine alignment. There's a moment in the spiritual journey that feels like stepping through a veil. It's not loud or dramatic. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable, until suddenly, nothing in your life looks the same. Conversations feel different. Decisions feel clearer. The world itself seems to respond to your presence in ways it never did before. This is what happens when you're truly aligned with God's energy. The universe stops being a random place of chaos and begins to behave like a mirror, reflecting back the state of your inner being. And the clearer you become inside, the more clearly the world around you begins to reflect that clarity. You don't just see life, you see through it. You start to notice hidden patterns, divine timing, invisible threads connecting everything. This clarity can feel strange at first. You begin to see beyond the masks people wear. You sense their intentions before they speak. You feel the weight of words, the energy behind actions. It's not about judgment, it's about discernment. Alignment sharpens your perception. You begin to recognize what is yours to carry and what is not. You can walk away from drama without guilt. You can say no without explaining. You can see someone's pain without absorbing it. This is not detachment. It's divine maturity. And it's one of the clearest signs that you are moving in step with something higher than yourself. When God's energy flows through you, you stop trying to control everything. You stop chasing outcomes. You stop needing guarantees. Instead, you begin to move with trust. Not blind faith, but a deep, felt knowing that life is unfolding exactly as it should. Even the delays, even the detours, they all start to feel like choreography rather than accidents. You begin to understand that rejection is redirection, that endings are actually beginnings in disguise. And suddenly, things that once broke you now build you. You see the purpose in your past, the lessons in your loss. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances. You see yourself as a co-creator with God, sculpting meaning from everything you touch. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and realized that what you see is not just your reflection, but your vibration? When you're aligned, the people you attract, the opportunities that find you, the challenges that arise, they all mirror your current state of consciousness. This is the divine feedback loop. It's how the universe teaches us. If you find yourself surrounded by chaos, it might be time to check your internal world. If you're constantly facing resistance, maybe something inside you is out of step with your truth. But when you're aligned, the flow returns. Doors open, relationships deepen, purpose finds you. Not because you forced it, but because you became a match for it. And yet, this clarity can be lonely. Because once you see, you can't unsee. You can't go back to small talk. You can't go back to toxic cycles. You can't pretend to be okay with things your soul no longer resonates with. This is the cost of alignment. But it's a sacred cost. Because what you lose in comfort, you gain in truth. What you release in attachment, you gain in freedom. You might lose people, places, patterns, but you gain yourself. Fully, deeply, unapologetically. And in that space, you no longer ask the world for permission to exist. You simply become. This is the strange clarity of divine alignment. You begin to live with such intention that every moment becomes meaningful. You begin to listen so deeply that silence becomes sacred. You begin to love so fully that your presence becomes healing. You no longer wait for signs, you are the sign. You live in a way that reminds others of what's possible. You walk through the world like a living prayer, your every breath a conversation with the divine. So let me ask you something. What if everything that's happening in your life right now is a mirror? What if every frustration, every blessing, every delay, every breakthrough is not happening to you but for you? What if life itself is trying to show you who you've become? Can you see it? Can you feel the shift? Because once you do, you'll never look at anything the same way again. This is the gift of alignment. It doesn't change the world, it changes how you see it. And that changes everything. The sacred disruption, how divine energy dismantles what's no longer you. When divine energy truly begins to move through your life, it doesn't always bring comfort. In fact, more often than not, it brings disruption. Not because God wants to hurt you, but because He wants to heal you in the most real and lasting way. And to do that, everything that is not aligned with who you are becoming must be stripped away. This part of the journey is not talked about enough. We love to speak about miracles, peace, and alignment. But few are prepared for the sacred dismantling that must occur before those blessings can fully arrive. Because when you are truly aligned with God's energy, you do not just attract peace, you attract truth. And truth does not coexist with illusion. This disruption doesn't always look spiritual on the surface. It might look like a breakup, a layoff, a move, a betrayal, a sudden end to something you thought was forever. It might come as a deep restlessness or a sudden disinterest in everything that once excited you. It might appear as exhaustion, a pulling away from people, a craving for solitude. But beneath the chaos, something holy is happening. The version of you that was built on survival, fear, and performance is being asked to step aside. And the real you, the one born of light, clarity, and divine essence, is being unearthed. This is not punishment. This is resurrection. Sometimes the most spiritual thing God can do for you is tear down the life you built from your wounds. Because what you built in fear can never hold the weight of your calling. What you built to protect yourself can't carry the expansion your soul is asking for. So the divine begins to dismantle. Slowly, sometimes violently. And in the process, everything that was never truly you begins to fall away. The roles, the masks, the coping mechanisms, the false narratives, you're being freed from them. Not because you did something wrong, but because you're finally ready to be right with who you truly are. This is where the fire comes in. The sacred fire. The one that purifies without apology. And when you're in it, you'll be tempted to resist. You'll want to cling to the familiar. You'll want to go back to what was predictable, even if it was painful. But if you can trust the fire, If you can allow the holy undoing, you will emerge from it transformed. The people who walk through divine disruption and don't give up are the ones who carry a power and a peace that cannot be faked, because that kind of peace is earned through surrender. One of the most painful truths you'll face in this space is realizing that some relationships, environments, and even ambitions were only meant to serve a version of you that no longer exists. And when you feel that truth deep in your bones, there's grief. There's a mourning of what you thought would be. But there's also liberation, because you're no longer forcing yourself to fit into something you've outgrown. You're no longer dimming your light to stay accepted in rooms that were never meant for your soul. That kind of honesty is rare. That kind of courage is sacred. And that's exactly what divine alignment demands. Let me ask you something that might shake you. What if the breakdown you're experiencing isn't the end of something but the beginning of something sacred? What if every single thing falling apart is actually falling into place, just on a timeline and in a rhythm you can't yet comprehend? Could you trust it? Could you lean into it instead of running from it? Because your resistance to the disruption only delays your rebirth. The faster you let go of what's no longer you, the faster you step into who you truly are. You see, divine energy doesn't just elevate your life, it will excavate it. It will dig up the lies. It will pull out the roots of bitterness, insecurity, and shame. It will shine a light on the hidden places you've tried to ignore, not to expose you, but to heal you. And if you allow it, you will begin to feel a freedom that's not dependent on circumstances. You'll begin to experience a joy that doesn't need permission. You'll begin to walk with a clarity that makes even the most uncertain path feel like home. But first, everything that cannot go with you must go, and that's the sacred disruption. It's messy, it's painful, it's confusing, but it's necessary. Because God is not interested in polishing the surface of your life. He is interested in transformation, and transformation requires truth. It requires depth. It requires the courage to let what wants to die so that what is divine can finally live through you. And when you come out the other side of that disruption, you'll see it clearly. You'll look back and realize that the things you thought were breaking you were actually blessing you. That the people who left were making space for those who could love you as you are becoming. That the unanswered prayers were actually divine protection. And you'll stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start whispering, "Thank you for setting me free." Because once you've walked through the sacred disruption, once you've tasted the clarity that only comes after the collapse, you'll never fear the fire again. You'll welcome it. You'll understand that every dismantling is making room for something more real, more aligned, more eternal. And that's when you become dangerous to anything false. That's when you become a vessel for something truly divine. Your life becomes a prayer, living as a channel of God's energy. There's a moment after the fire has done its work, after the illusions have crumbled, and the false selves have been laid to rest, when something extraordinary happens. You stop searching. You stop striving. You stop asking to be shown the way, and instead, you become the way. Your life, stripped of performance and pretense, begins to move with intention. Every breath you take starts to carry a frequency of reverence. Every action, no matter how small, becomes an offering. And without even trying, your life turns into a living prayer. This is what it means to live as a channel of God's energy. It's not about standing on a stage or preaching with grand words. It's about presence. It's about integrity. It's about walking through the world with a heart so aligned that even your silence speaks. When you reach this place, you no longer need to convince anyone of your beliefs. Your energy does the talking. Your peace becomes contagious. Your clarity becomes magnetic. And the people around you begin to shift, not because you tried to change them, but because your authenticity invites them to return to their own. When you live as a channel, you stop compartmentalizing the sacred. You don't just meet God in temples or during meditation. You meet Him in traffic, in conversations, in heartbreak, in laughter. You begin to see the divine in everything, the way the wind moves the trees, the way a child's laughter cuts through the noise, the way a stranger's smile on a heavy day feels like a message from heaven. Everything becomes sacred because you've become receptive to the sacredness in everything. That's the mark of someone who is not just aligned, but who lives aligned. And the most beautiful part, you start to realize there's no separation between you and the divine. You are not reaching towards some distant God, you are embodying Him, not in arrogance but in divine humility. You become a vessel, a tuning fork vibrating with the frequency of love, truth, peace, and power. You begin to feel when you are in flow and when you are out of it. And when you're out, you don't panic. You simply return, gently, quietly, like a prayer slipping back into the rhythm of the breath. You learn to trust the pauses. You learn to honor the whispers. You no longer rush the process. You understand that divine timing is not just about waiting, it's about preparing. So you prepare, you refine, you stay open. And because of that, you start to experience what very few ever do, the joy of living from the inside out. The joy of knowing you are no longer reacting to life, you are responding to God's movement within it. This doesn't mean you won't face challenges. It means you now face them differently. You meet pain with presence. You meet resistance with wisdom. You meet the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. And above all, you meet others with compassion, not because it's your duty, but because it's your nature. You've become love. You've become peace. You've become a mirror of the divine. Ask yourself this now with full honesty of heart. If your life was the only scripture someone ever read, what would it teach them about God? That's the question that changes everything. That's the question that reshapes how you speak, how you love, how you walk through this world. Because when your life becomes a prayer, you no longer seek to impress or convince, you seek to embody. And in that embodiment, you unlock the true purpose of alignment, to become a living conduit of divine energy, so that the world may feel God through you. And when that becomes your truth, you realize you never needed signs at all. You were the sign. You were the message you were waiting for. You were the prayer answered in the form of a soul waking up. And now you live awake, fully, freely, aligned.